Okay, man, we have, last month we kicked off a series that we're going to be in for a total of 8 months, wrapping up in May. And it's the discussion around 8 leadership lessons every man needs. And I know for probably most of us, you don't wake up thinking about leadership. As men, most of us, we wake up and we think about, okay, what do I have to get done today? All of the list of to-dos that are on my docket, the emails that I got to respond to, the meetings that I got to make, the deadlines that are looming over my head, getting the kids to where they need to be or back from where they need to be, anything that's broken around the house, whether you fix it yourself or you're like me and you've learned that it's just better to call somebody to come in and do it, or anything that relates to just the infrastructure of your life, right? Paying the bills. Generally just, you wake up and you think about, okay, how do I meet all of the expectations that are placed upon me for that day, for that week? And so when that's what we wake up consumed with and thinking about, what ends up happening is, well, we just assume that leadership is for somebody in a different place than us, somebody at a higher place than us, somebody with a corner office, somebody with an executive title, somebody with a larger platform, somebody that's built a larger book of business than we have, right? Leadership is oftentimes saved for somebody else. But the thing that I want to just hammer into your heads over the next 8 months is that leadership is not about a role. Leadership is not about a title. Every single one of us is leading, whether we realize it or whether we accept it or whether we acknowledge it or not. Because leadership is ultimately about influence. It's about the way that your life and your decisions, your actions, your words, your behaviors impact the lives of people around you. When in the middle of a conflict at home, when you make a choice on how to respond to your wife or how to respond to your kids, that's leadership. When you're in the middle of an argument, in the middle of a meeting at work, how you choose to show up in that place, how you choose to conduct yourself in that disagreement, that's leadership. When you have a friend who's in the middle of a crisis or headed down a road that you know is going to end in disaster, whether you speak up or whether you stay silent, that's leadership. In those moments, we have a choice to show up and to step up or to shrink back and to let things kind of play out on their own. And this is when our leadership, I think, is tested most. Because we as men, if we don't avail ourselves of those opportunities, if we shrink back from those moments when it takes some courage and some bravery, and we don't have confidence or certainty on how our actions or behaviors or words are going to be experienced or accepted, and we kind of pull back, we miss the opportunities to impact and to influence people's lives. Think about some of your probably biggest regrets. I know some of my biggest regrets are moments, not sins of commission, but sins of omission, right? Moments when you should have said something, or you should have done something different, or you should have intervened in a way or a moment that you should have forgiven somebody when you chose to instead be critical. This is all couched under the idea of leadership. And so I think the main idea that we're going to be talking about today and the story that we're going to be looking at in Scripture is that leadership, it doesn't start with position. It starts with responsibility. Leadership doesn't start with position. It starts with responsibility. And the story that we're going to be looking at is the story of a man named Nehemiah. And maybe you're familiar with Nehemiah, but his story takes place kind of years after the nation of Israel has been conquered and carried into exile. By this time, Persia was kind of the ruling empire, and there's this small group of exiles, Jewish people, who go back to Jerusalem and they begin to rebuild. But most had settled and kind of just accepted life far away from home in a different empire under a different set of customs and beliefs and religions and rules. And so what ends up happening in this story is a small group of a remnant of those who have gone back to try to settle back in Jerusalem have come back to Persia, And Nehemiah gets word about the state of disrepair that the city is in. And so this is what Nehemiah says in chapter 1, verse 1. In the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. They said to me, "Those who survived the exile are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace." And here's why. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have been burned with fire. This would be the modern day equivalent of living in your home without a front door. There's nothing that stops people from entering in or exiting or coming in to harm you and your family. Same is true of the city of Jerusalem. Same is true of any city back in that time period. Its exterior walls was its sense of protection and its buffer between the city and the outside world. So imagine living in your home without a front door. You would always be on alert as to who might be walking by, who might be walking up. You start to get real suspicious of the mailman or of the UPS driver anytime somebody's walking up to the front of your house, because there's nothing that would stop them from entering into the house. And so Nehemiah hears this. The walls of Jerusalem are broken down, but Nehemiah is 1,000 miles away. He's the cupbearer to the king. He's kind of like the king's sommelier. And so he's got a secure, cushy job. And it would be far easier in this moment for Nehemiah to say, "Oh, that's awful. Dang, I really hate that for them. That really stinks." But that's not what Nehemiah does. He doesn't ignore it. He doesn't look away from the problems and the need that exists. This is what it says. It says, "When I heard these things, I sat down and I wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." Nehemiah hears this report about the state of Jerusalem and about its walls and about its gates. And so he weeps and he fasts and he prays. He lets the burden hit him. He becomes overcome with grief and sorrow. And what I think Nehemiah's story is showing us is that leadership is, again, not about a title or a role, but it's about when you notice a need and you choose to care. When you see something that's wrong, see something that isn't as it should be, and you choose to care about it, you allow it to impact you. When you see what's happening in your home and you hear the tension in your wife's voice, and it could be far easier to be like, "Oh, this is my opportunity to go to the garage," right? Or there's something in the other room that I need to go attend to. But you say, "No, because I care about her, whatever's going on, now this is my problem too." Or with your teenager, and you can just tell that something's off with them, and maybe they're starting to drift with a friend group or down a road that you're concerned about. But you know that if you bring it up, it's going to be a fight, and you don't really want to fight, and so you could just look away. You could just say, "Oh, well, they'll figure it out on their own." Or with your friends, you've got a buddy who you know has got a substance problem, whether it's drugs or whether it's alcohol, and you say, "Oh, that's Tom. Tom's just always kind of been this way, and so Tom's going to have to hit rock bottom on his own." And you kind of wash your hands of these problems. I think these are moments when we miss the opportunity to step up into leadership. Because one of the hardest things I think to do in our world today is to care, to not turn a blind eye, to not change the channel, to not swipe and scroll to the next story, but to lean in and to accept that this is a problem and maybe it's up to us to step in and do something. And so this is what happens in the story of Nehemiah. He's this cupbearer to the king. He's overcome with grief about this situation. He's choosing to care about the state of Jerusalem. And this is what happens next. It says, "In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before, and so the king asked me, 'Why does your face look so sad when you're not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart.' And it goes on and he says, 'I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, May the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? I think that line is one of the essence of leadership. I was very much afraid, but I said. I think it is so easy to think that great leaders are these superhero characters who don't ever get tired, and they don't ever feel fear, and they don't ever experience doubt or uncertainty. And none of that is actually true. Leadership is not the absence of fear. It's the courage to step up. It's acting despite the uncertainty that you feel. It's choosing to lean in even though you're a little bit intimidated. It's choosing to step up when you feel insecure or afraid of what might happen. This is what Nehemiah is modeling for us. Nehemiah takes the risk. He names what's going on. He asks the king for permission. He asks the king to equip him and send him to Jerusalem so that he can do something about it. And God uses this bold step to open the door for Nehemiah to begin to have an opportunity to make a difference. This is what Nehemiah says. It says, "The king said to me, 'What is it you want?' And then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, 'If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it.'" I mean, think how easy it would be for Nehemiah to just let this be somebody else's problem. He hears about it. It impacts him. He feels that need, and he presses into the discomfort and says, "King, send me. I need to go and do something about this problem that I see." And so at work, when you know you should speak up in a meeting, but you're tempted to stay quiet because that feels safer, we miss the opportunity for leadership. Or with your kids, when you know that it's actually not that fair for mom to be the bad guy all the time, and it's probably your opportunity to speak into some behavioral modification or correction that's needed, but you choose to be quiet, we miss the opportunity for leadership. Or with your family, whether it's your parents or your in-laws, and they're in trouble, or they need help, or they need more assistance than you really want to give because it's kind of an inconvenience and they're not all that nice to you when you do things for them anyway. You step back from that opportunity, we miss the opportunity for leadership. And so in Nehemiah's story, the king sends him to Jerusalem. And when he shows up, he doesn't go around talking to people about it and trying to rally support. He goes straight to the walls. And at night, he inspects the walls, he walks around, he sees the rubble, he touches the broken pieces of the city, the broken gates. He walks all through the ruins. And after he inspects it himself, after he comes face to face with the issues and the problems, then he gathers the people together. And this is what he says. He says, "Then I said to them, 'You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace.' And I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me." Nehemiah leads with action. He goes to the walls himself. He examines and inspects the problem in its true state. And then he begins to share the vision with the people of what needs to be done in response. And this is what they say. He says, they replied, "Let us start rebuilding." And so they began this good work. I think what I have found to be so true in life, and we see again illustrated in the story of Nehemiah, is that our leadership in action, it inspires others. It is so easy to wait for somebody else to make the first move. It is so easy to wait for somebody else to apologize first. It is so easy to wait for somebody else to name or be the dissenting opinion in a debate or a conversation. It is so easy to wait and not say anything about kind of the elephant in the room that everybody knows is going on. But if we can lean in and just have a little bit of courage and we begin to speak or to act, I find that it totally shifts the balance of so many things in our lives. With our friends, when one of you chooses to be honest about what's going on, instead of exaggerating or minimizing what's happening in your life, my guess is some of you have experienced that at our men's breakfast, when somebody's like really honest and vulnerable about where they are in their life in that moment, or in your small group, when someone says, man, I'm having a tough week and here's what's going on. And then the rest of the conversation shifts and changes and feels totally different because somebody was brave enough to be like real. This is what leadership looks like. When, as a parent, you start praying for your kids and the choices that they're making and the lives that they're living, and not just, God, take care of my kids, but like really earnestly praying for them, something will change in your home. That is leadership. So, as we think about what leadership actually looks like, it's not about waiting for the promotion. It's not waiting for a role or a change in employment status. It's not waiting, but it's seeing the need. It's recognizing that something's not right in this. And I'm not going to wait for anybody else to do anything about it. I'm going to assume that it's my responsibility to make a difference. Whether it's at home, whether it's in your relationship or your marriage, whether it's with your friends, whether it's at work. What would it look like if we as men committed to leading in this way? Not waiting for the person with the highest title or the most authority or the kind of the greatest influence, but to lead from whatever seat we're in and whatever situation we're in. To be the one to be like, yeah, this isn't right and we need to do something about it, and so I'll go first.